The Council of Assembled Species had existed for approximately 4,000 stellar cycles, and in all that time, never once had the chamber fallen into complete, suffocating silence quite like this. Ambassador Krell of the Vaxorian Empire shifted his 3 primary legs uncomfortably, his sensory stalks twitching as he waited for literally anyone to speak first. Next to him, High Delegate Mora from the Centaurian Alliance pretended to examine her data tablet with suddenly intense fascination, her scales shifting through nervous color patterns. So, Krell finally ventured, his translator chip working overtime to convey the appropriate level of diplomatic concern. Did anyone else receive a formal declaration of, what did they call it? Polite disinterest? Across the semicircular table, Trade Minister Ven from the Quarian Systems let out what could only be described as a bitter chirp. Oh yes. Complete with an attached compilation of what humans refer to as memes. Apparently our trade dispute reminded them of something called a participation trophy argument at a child's sporting event. They sent us a holographic image, Mora added quietly, her dual voice harmonizing in what sounded like existential defeat. It was a creature called a cat, sitting at a table with the caption, "I should buy a spaceship and leave." Below that, they wrote, "Us." Regarding galactic politics, Krell would have laughed if the situation were not so utterly unprecedented. The humans, those bizarre mammals from the third planet of an unremarkable yellow star, had just done something no species in recorded history had ever accomplished. They had looked at an invitation to join the largest military alliance in the known galaxy, considered the benefits, weighed the consequences, and then replied with a 2-word message that was currently causing diplomatic chaos across 17 star systems. No thanks. Not no. We require further negotiation. Not no, but we propose alternative terms. Just, no thanks. Followed by what appeared to be a digital image of a human beverage and the phrase, "We're good." Perhaps Senior Military Advisor Thorne suggested from his position near the chamber's viewing portal, his mechanized voice unit clicking with what Krell had learned to recognize as skepticism. We simply did not explain the situation with sufficient clarity. Humans are a relatively young species. Maybe they do not understand the gravity of what is happening in the outer territories. Krell's sensory stalks drooped. Thorne, my friend, I hate to be the one to inform you of this, but the humans understand perfectly well. In fact, they sent us a detailed analysis of the conflict, complete with historical parallels from their own planetary history, projected casualty rates for all involved parties, economic impact assessments, and a 6-part documentary series they apparently produced in the span of 3 solar days explaining why, and I quote, "This looks like trouble we have seen before." The silence returned, heavier than before. The situation was this. The Kragoth Dominion, a militaristic empire from the galaxy's edge, had been expanding aggressively for the past century. They had conquered 47 systems, enslaved 12 species, and showed absolutely no signs of stopping. The Council had tried diplomacy, sanctions, and strongly worded letters. None of it worked. War was becoming not just probable but inevitable, which brought them to the humans. Humanity, despite being a spacefaring civilization for barely 200 years, had developed a reputation. It was not a reputation built on military might, though they certainly had that. It was not based on economic dominance, though their markets were formidable. No. Humanity's reputation rested on something far more concerning to the established galactic order. They were unpredictable. Let me see if I understand our current predicament, Mora said, her scales now settling into a resigned shade of blue-gray. The Kragoth have ignored our ultimatum. They are currently positioning fleet elements around the Tertian cluster, which will cut off supply lines to 1/8 of Council space. We have cut off supply lines to 1/8 of Council space. We have assembled the largest military coalition in galactic history, comprising 400,000 vessels and troops numbering in the billions, and the one species that every military strategist agrees could actually make a decisive difference in this conflict, has responded to our call for alliance with a collection of humorous images and a polite refusal. You forgot the part where they also sent us a gift basket, Van added miserably. It contained something called chocolate, a beverage labeled coffee, and a small card that said, "Good luck with that." Krell had been the primary diplomat assigned to the human case. He had spent the better part of a year studying their culture, trying to understand what made them tick. What he had learned was simultaneously fascinating and deeply troubling. Humans, he had discovered, were extraordinarily good at war. Their entire evolutionary history was basically a continuous highlight reel of increasingly creative ways to defeat opponents. They had invented weapons that could crack planets, defensive systems that could withstand star-level detonations, and tactical doctrines that made the Kragoth, looked like disorganized children playing with building blocks. But here was the thing. The really weird thing. They did not like war. Oh, individual humans would fight readily enough. They had competitive spirits that would make a Vaxorian duelist look passive. They loved games, sports, competitions of all kinds. But actual war, the organized state-sponsored violence kind, they seemed to view it with the same enthusiasm most species reserved for waste processing duty. I do not understand, Thorne said, his mechanical appendages clicking in agitation. By every assessment, humans should be a warrior culture. They have the capacity, the technology, the tactical acumen. Their entertainment is filled with military themes. They write songs about battles. They study historical conflicts with obsessive detail. Yet when offered a chance to join the most significant military action in modern history, they just refuse. Krell pulled up a file on his personal display. I have been reviewing human historical records. Do you know what I found? In the past 3,000 years of their recorded history, there have been exactly 211 years of what they considered total peace. That means out of 3,000 years they were fighting someone somewhere for 2,789 of them. That proves my point, Thorne exclaimed. They are a warrior species. Wait, there is more. Krell continued. In the past 400 years since they entered what they call their modern era, they fought two massive global conflicts. The first one killed approximately 20 million of them. The second killed somewhere between 70 and 85 million. And these were just the direct casualties, not counting famines, diseases, and economic collapse. Mora's scales rippled with shock. That is almost 5% of their global population at the time. Correct. And do you know what they call that period? The one with the two wars that killed millions and nearly destroyed their civilization? Krell paused for effect. They call it the war to end all wars, followed by the war they fought because the first one did not actually end anything. And after the second one they looked at what they had done, at the weapons they had created, at the radioactive craters that would remain toxic for thousands of years, and they made a collective decision. What decision? Ren asked, his translator conveying genuine curiosity. Never again. The chamber fell silent once more. Obviously not literally, Krell clarified. They still had conflicts, smaller wars, proxy battles, but nothing on that scale. Because they had developed weapons that could sterilize their entire planet in approximately 90 minutes, and they realized that winning was not actually possible anymore. Only degrees of losing. Thorne's mechanical voice carried a note of frustration. Then why not join us? We are trying to stop a genocidal empire. This is exactly the kind of fight that should appeal to their sense of justice. Krell pulled up another file. 3 days ago I had a conversation with someone named Lieutenant Commander Jessica Park, who serves in something called the Human Defense Coalition Strategic Analysis Division. I asked her exactly that question. Would you like to know what she told me? He did not wait for an answer. She said, and I am quoting directly from the transcript, Ambassador Krell, with all due respect, we have seen this movie before. You have a big bad enemy who needs to be stopped. You need our help because your military is not quite good enough. We come in, we win your war for you, and then what? Then we are the scary ones. Then we are the ones everyone worries about. Then someone decides we are too powerful, too dangerous, and we get to be the villains in the sequel. We invented this plot. We have lived through every possible variation. The answer is no thanks. We are going to sit this one out, with our chocolate and our coffee and our memes, and you all can figure it out yourselves. The silence that followed was profound. Finally Mora spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. They are afraid we will turn on them. Not afraid, Krell corrected. Certain. Because it is what always happens in their history. The ally in one war becomes the enemy in the next. They have a saying, today's freedom fighter is tomorrow's tyrant. They do not trust the cycle to be different just because it is happening in space instead of on their planet. Ben made a sound like air escaping from a pressure valve. So what do? We cannot win this war without them. The projections are clear. We will lose millions, maybe billions of lives. The Kragoth will continue expanding, and the humans are just going to watch it happen. Krell's sensory stalks curled in what, among his people, signified deep contemplation. Lieutenant Commander Park said something else. She said that humans avoid war, not because they are weak, not because they are cowardly, but because they are very, very good at it. And when you are that good at something, you understand exactly what it costs. She said war is like fire, incredibly useful, absolutely necessary sometimes, and completely capable of burning down everything you love if you are not extremely careful. Poetic, Thorne muttered, but ultimately unhelpful. Maybe not, Mora interjected, her scales shifting to a thoughtful pattern. If humans avoid war because they understand it so well, perhaps we need to approach this differently. We have been trying to recruit them as warriors. What if instead we ask them to help us avoid becoming like them? Krell felt his primary brain chambers activate in a way they had not in years. You mean ask them to help us end this without a prolonged conflict? Exactly. They refused to join our war. But maybe they would help us prevent one. It was simultaneously the most brilliant and most humiliating suggestion Krell had ever heard. Go to the humans, not as potential allies in glorious battle, but as students seeking to learn from their mistakes. His translator probably could not convey the full depth of the sigh he released. I will schedule another meeting with Lieutenant Commander Park, he said finally, though I suspect she is going to find this absolutely hilarious. Somewhere in human space, in an office aboard the HCS Copernicus, Jessica Park was indeed finding something hilarious. She had just finished reading the latest intelligence reports on the Council's military preparations, and the sheer scope of their logistical incompetence was both impressive and deeply concerning. They are going to get millions of people killed, she muttered to her second-in-command, a cheerful woman named Diana Kowalski, who was currently eating something that smelled like garlic and cheese. Probably, Diana agreed around a mouthful of food. Think they will listen to reason? Absolutely not. They are committed now. Pride, politics, the usual suspects. So we just watch? Jessica leaned back in her chair, staring at the tactical displays showing fleet movements across multiple star systems. We watch, we wait, and we prepare to do what we always do, which is, clean up the mess afterward. Again, Diana raised her beverage in a mock toast to being really, really good at things we wish we did not have to be good. I will drink to that. Outside the viewport, stars glittered in the darkness. Indifferent to the plans of empires, the calculations of strategists, and the desperate hopes of species trying very hard not to destroy each other. It was, Jessica thought. The emergency transmission reached the Human Defense Coalition headquarters at approximately 0300 hours, standard Earth time, which meant that Commander Jessica Park was 3 hours into her sleep cycle, and absolutely not in the mood for whatever diplomatic crisis had decided to interrupt her rest. This better be important. She growled into her communicator, not bothering to turn on the video feed because her hair was doing something that defied at least 2 laws of physics and she simply did not care enough to fix it. Commander Park, came the unmistakable harmonic voice of Ambassador Krell, except now it carried an edge of something that sounded uncomfortably like panic. I apologize for the intrusion at this hour, but we have a situation that requires immediate human consultation. Jessica sat up suddenly, very awake. In the 3 months since she had politely told the council to handle their own war, Krell had respected their boundaries. If he was calling now, something had gone catastrophically wrong. Define situation, she said, already pulling up her tactical displays with one hand while attempting to locate pants with the other. The Kragoth sent an envoy. Jessica paused, one leg halfway into her uniform trousers. I'm sorry, they what? An envoy. A diplomatic representative. They requested negotiations. We thought perhaps this meant they were willing to discuss terms, maybe reach some sort of peaceful resolution. Krell's translator was working overtime to convey what sounded like several layers of emotion, none of them good. We were very, very wrong. Krell, my friend, you are going to need to be more specific because right now you sound like someone who just discovered that their emergency brake was actually the accelerator. There was a pause, presumably while Krell's translator processed the metaphor. The envoy was not sent to negotiate. The envoy was sent to deliver an ultimatum, and also to demonstrate exactly why we should accept said ultimatum. Go on, Jessica said, now fully dressed and heading toward the operations center at a pace that made junior officers dive out of her way. They brought a ship, a small vessel, maybe 50 meters in length. They said it was a gift, a demonstration of Kragoth generosity and technological superiority. Then they asked us to scan it. Jessica felt a cold sensation crawling up her spine. The same feeling she got right before simulations went sideways. What was on the ship? That is the problem, Commander. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. No weapons. No cargo, no crew. Just an empty hull. We scanned it with every sensor we have. When we expressed confusion, the envoy smiled. Do you know what is truly horrifying about the Kragoth, Commander Park? I have a feeling you are about to tell me. They have facial structures remarkably similar to humans. Which means when they smile, we can tell. And this one smiled in a way that made every being in that chamber want to run. Jessica had reached the operations center. Diana was already there, looking equally disheveled and equally alert. She mouthed the word Kragoth, And Jessica nodded grimly. What happened next? Jessica asked, putting the call on the main view screen. Krell's image appeared and he looked worse than Jessica had ever seen him. His sensory stalks were drooping. His carapace had lost its usual luster. And his 3 primary eyes were dilated in what she had learned to recognize as extreme stress. The envoy said, "This vessel will demonstrate our commitment to peace." Then he pressed a single button on a remote device. Commander Park, the ship simply ceased to exist. Not exploded. Not disintegrated. It was there, and then it was. Our sensors registered nothing. No energy discharge, no particle scatter, no quantum fluctuation. One moment matter, next moment, not matter. As if someone had simply deleted it from reality. Diana let out a low whistle. That is not good. It gets worse, Krell continued. The envoy explained that this was their latest weapon development. He called it a matter dissolution cascade. He said they could scale it from a single ship to an entire planet. Then he gave us his ultimatum. Surrender unconditionally within 30 solar days or they will use this weapon on 3 council worlds of their choosing. As a demonstration, the operations center had gone completely silent. Every officer present was staring at the view screen with expressions ranging from shock to horror to the particular kind of anger that came from watching bullies operate. Jessica took a long, slow breath. How many people live on an average council world? Between 2 and 8 billion depending on the species and colonization density. So they are threatening to delete somewhere between 6 and 24 billion sentient beings to prove a point. That is correct. And you are calling us because Krell's translator emitted something that might have been a laugh if it were not so bitter. Because every military strategist in council space just calculated the same thing. If we go to war now with conventional weapons against an enemy with this technology, we will lose. Badly. They will delete our fleets before we can even engage. The only advantage we have in numbers becomes meaningless if those numbers can simply be erased from existence. Jessica looked at Diana, who was already running calculations on her tablet, her expression growing darker with each passing second. Here is the thing though, Krell continued, his voice taking on a desperate edge. We analyzed the demonstration. Our best scientists, our most advanced quantum theorists, everyone who could possibly understand what we saw, and they all reached the same conclusion, which is, it is a trick, not the weapon. The weapon is very real, but the delivery system, the way they used it, the specific circumstances of the demonstration, all of it was carefully choreographed to hide a critical flaw. Jessica felt her tactical instincts activate, the same part of her brain that had kept her alive through 3 border conflicts and 2 first contact scenarios that had gone sideways. What kind of flaw? We think it requires specific conditions to function, precise quantum states that have to be established in advance. The envoy had that ship brought in days ago, plenty of time to prepare it. But in combat, against moving targets in unpredictable quantum states, we think it might not work at all, or at least not work reliably. You think? Jessica repeated slowly. You are not certain. No, we are not certain, which is why we need your help. Diana looked up from her calculations. Commander, if they are right about the weapon limitations, this becomes a standard escalation scenario. Kragoth have a devastating first strike capability but no follow-through. Council forces have numbers and conventional superiority but no counter to the opening move. Classic stalemate that resolves into protracted conflict with massive casualties on both sides. Unless someone can figure out a way to neutralize the weapon before they use it, Jessica finished. She looked back at Krell. You want us to find the flaw? Exploit it? Take the weapon off the board before the shooting starts? Yes. And before you say no again, let me explain why this is different from asking you to join our war. We are not asking for warriors, Commander Park. We are asking for problem solvers. This is a technical challenge, a puzzle with billions of lives hanging in the balance. You do not have to fire a single shot. You just have to be smarter than the Kragoth engineers who built this thing. Jessica had to admit, it was a good pitch. Appeal to human competitiveness, frame it as an intellectual challenge rather than military action. Emphasize the humanitarian aspect. Krell had either gotten very good at understanding human psychology or he had excellent advisors, probably both. I need to see all your data on the weapon demonstration, she said finally. Every sensor reading, every analysis, every half-baked theory your scientists came up with. I also need complete intelligence on Kragoth technology base, their scientific publications if they have any, and any information about where they might have developed this thing. Krell's sensory stalks perked up slightly. Does this mean you will help? This means I will look at your data and decide if there is anything we can do. No promises, no commitment, and definitely no military alliance. We solve this problem. If we solve it, we do it our way. Understood. Completely understood. I am transmitting the data now. Commander, I know you have no reason to trust us, no reason to believe we would not turn on you the moment this crisis is resolved. But I want you to know something. What is that? Humans avoid war because you understand what it costs. We are beginning to learn that lesson too. Perhaps too late, but we are learning. If we survive this, I promise you, the council will be different. Jessica wanted to believe him. She really did. But she had read enough history to know that promises made in crisis rarely survived into peacetime. Let's focus on the surviving part first, she said. Park out. The screen went dark. Diana was already pulling up the transmitted data, her eyes scanning through information faster than should have been humanly possible. Boss, this is extensive. They sent us everything, including some stuff that looks like it should be classified about 10 levels above what we are cleared for. They are desperate. Desperate people make poor security decisions. Jessica moved to stand beside her second, watching streams of data flow across multiple displays. What are you seeing? Honestly, I am seeing exactly what Krell described. The weapon works, but the demonstration was too perfect. Real weapons in field conditions are messy. This was surgical, which means either they have the most precise weapon delivery system ever created, or they stacked the deck to make it look better than it actually is. Did you build something to counter it? Diana was quiet for a long moment, her fingers dancing across her keyboard as she pulled up theoretical models and ran quick simulations. Maybe, if we had access to their research data, if we could figure out the exact quantum frequencies they are using, if we had about 6 months and unlimited resources. Since we have none of those things, I would say our chances are somewhere between slim and none. And Slim just left the building. So we are back to the original problem. The council fights a war they cannot win, millions die, and we sit on the sidelines feeling terrible about it. Unless, Diana said slowly, her eyes still fixed on the data streams, we approach this completely differently. I am listening. The Kragoth want to look invincible. They want everyone so terrified of this weapon that resistance seems pointless. But terror only works if people believe in it. What if we do not try to counter the weapon at all? What if we just make everyone doubt it actually works the way the Kragoth claim? Jessica felt a smile tugging at the corner of her mouth. Information warfare. Undermine their credibility. Introduce uncertainty. Make them prove the weapon works under conditions they have not prepared for. Exactly. And if they cannot prove it, if they have to admit any limitations or conditions, the whole psychological advantage collapses. Suddenly it is not a miracle weapon. It is just another piece of military hardware with specific use cases and vulnerabilities. That is still risky. If we are wrong, if the weapon works exactly as advertised and we have just encouraged the council to resist, a lot of people die. Diana finally looked away from her screens, meeting Jessica's eyes. Boss, a lot of people die anyway if we do nothing. At least this way we give them a chance. She was right, of course. The calculations were brutal, but simple. Do nothing, and billions die over the next few years as the Kragoth expand. Help the council fight, and millions die in the opening battles, but maybe, just maybe, they find a way to win. Try to undermine the weapon's credibility and force the Kragoth to prove it works, and you introduce uncertainty into everyone's plans, which could lead to negotiations, stalemates, or at least better informed decisions. Jessica looked around the operations center at her team. Young faces, old faces, every skin tone humanity had to offer. All of them watching her with expressions that said they knew what was coming and they were ready for it anyway. This was why humans avoided war. Not because they were bad at it. Because they were so very, very good at it that they knew exactly what it meant. Every calculation, every probability, every terrible trade-off of lives against strategic objectives. But sometimes, just sometimes, avoiding the big war meant getting involved in all the messy steps that came before it. All right, she said finally. Diana, I need you to put together a team, best intelligence analysts, best theoretical physicists we have, and someone who actually understands quantum mechanics beyond the pop science level. Krell is going to get his help, just not the kind he is expecting. What are you going to tell him? Jessica pulled up the communication channel. The truth, that we are not joining his war, but we are going to make sure that if a war happens, everyone involved knows exactly what they are fighting with and what it costs. No miracle weapons, no easy victories, no illusions. Think he will go for it? I think he is desperate enough to try anything. And desperate allies are better than no allies at all. As the communication request went out, Jessica looked back at the tactical displays showing the positions of fleets, the locations of worlds, the complex web of alliances and threats that made up galactic politics. Somewhere out there, the Kragoth were counting on fear to win their war before it even started. They had forgotten the most important lesson that humans had learned the hard way, written in radioactive ash on the memories of cities that no longer existed. Fear was a weapon, but so was doubt, and humans had spent centuries learning how to use both. The game, as they said, was on, and this time humanity was playing to make sure everyone else actually understood the rules.